Right, now let's talk about climate change. People are calling it the crisis of our time, and it is. But it's easy to get lost in the story. The science is dense and politics gets in the way. World leaders, Kenya's president, governors, religious leaders, fathers, mothers, young and old are now talking about ways and means on how to slow it down. The devastation is unprecedented and something must be done now, fast and accurate. Agadius with more.
Over the past century, the average annual temperature on Earth has increased. The oceans have warmed, snow and ice caps have diminished, and sea levels have risen. Although evidence of climate change and its causes has been debated for more than 2 decades, there is now scientific consensus that climate change is occurring and is due to human activity.
Tunaona kwamba katika nchi ya Kenya kuna watu wana maumivu ama wanapata kujeruhiwa kwa sababu ya anga ama climate change.
These changes in the climate are imposing an increasing burden on governments, especially in countries with limited resources, in their efforts to protect vulnerable populations and realize human rights. Changing precipitation patterns, such as droughts and shorter but more intense rainfall, can have negative direct and indirect impacts on health and contribute to desertification and flooding.
Floods huwa zinakuja, unapata magari za watu zimepepwa, wanyama wamepepwa, na hiyo imesababisha watu kuwa katika hali ambayo haiko salama.
Food insecurity, migration and increased conflict, indigenous population, poor and socially marginalized individuals, women and people with disabilities are often most affected.
Babu, hata kuna watu ambao wanafanya ukulima kule, hata chakula mimea zao wasifanyi, hata wakijaribu kumwagilia maji haifanyi kwa sababu yani ukame, jua ni mingi, shida zimekuwa nyingi. Ukiingia mtaani hapa ni shida kwa sababu hata unaona magari vile zinakaa, kuna watu wanasafiri sababu ya ukame, shida zimekuwa mingi kwa mifuko za.
One reason for the attention to the relationship between climate change and human rights is the recognition that climate change is having an even impact across the world. Countries with tropical or subtropical climates, such as those in Africa, are projected to experience the effects of climate change most intensely, and low-income countries are least able to prevent and prepare for the impact of climate change. Residents of Budalangi have a long history of floods. People have often lost their lives in this area and products destroyed. Until recently, people were still dying in this region, but people have long since devised mechanisms of protecting themselves. According to a report released by United Nations Development Programme, Kenya's record of flood disaster indicates the worst flood recorded in 1961, 1962, and 1997-1998, the latter ones being the most intense, most widespread, and most severe. During this season, the flooding was associated with the El Nino phenomenon, a weather pattern that affects most parts of the world. El Nino is a disruption of ocean atmosphere system in the tropical Pacific, having important consequences for weather around the globe. It may cause increased rainfall in some areas and drought in others, thus changing the normal weather pattern.
Maji hapo ukiangalia visima zimekauka. Ukiangalia maji hata inakuja kwa mifereji, pia maji ujui maji hakuna, imeisha mahali inatoka ama nini. Maji tunapata leo, kesho hakuna maji. Maji unapaka laini, maji unakaa na jerikani kwa mtoni, the whole day hakuna maji.
Increased temperatures and unpredictable rainy seasons have placed increased pressure on water resources, resulting in less dry season grazing land, diminished livestock herds, and increased competition over grazing lands. Pastoralists told Human Rights Watch that prolonged and more frequent drought have exacerbated already difficult access potable water. making every day a struggle for survival. Women and girls often walk extremely long distances to dig for water in dry riverbeds. Many children become sick because their family are unable to provide them with sufficient food and clean water.
Uzito ambao tunakutana nayo ni kwa sababu ya ukame ambao tunaiona hii. Ukame imekuwa mingi kwa sababu ya watu wa jua kali kama sisi, na tu affect na watu zaidi. Hata ukienda huko mashinani, tunatembea tunaenda paka mashinani huko, at least tuone tunaweza anzia wapi tumalizia wapi, lakini tunapata ya kwamba huko ndio kuna shida mwingi sana.
Kenya's national and county government have acknowledged the impact that climate change has had and will have on people's lives. Kenya has also made several efforts towards developing a national policy addressing the effects of climate change.
Ningependa kuomba kwamba serikali yetu ya Kenya iingilie kati katika hizo areas ambazo ziko affected kama drought kule sehemu za Turkana, ya kwamba wanyama kufa, serikali ichukue jukumu tu la kusaidia wananchi wa Kenya.
Early this year, a climate change bill introducing a climate change council to ensure better coordination of the different climate change programs within the government was passed in the National Assembly and is, at the time of writing, awaiting the adoption by the Senate and signature of the President.
Yaani tunangoja tu Mungu atusaidie kwa sababu serikali yetu pia haituangalii na haitusaidii.
However, Human Rights Watch research finds that much more needs to be done. At the county level, the 2013 devolution agreement, which led to the decentralization of many government functions, has created many new responsibilities for the county government, which give it an expanded role in addressing the human rights effects on climate change and other environmental threats.
Kwa mfano, wakati huu wa kiangazi kuna some parts kama kule Turkana napata kwamba kuna maradhi, watu ufa, wanyama ukufa, na hiyo imesababisha watu kutoishi katika amani. Watu wanaishi wakiwa na hekaheka kwamba hawataweza kupata jinsi watakavyokuwa.
The government of Kenya is not alone in facing climate change and other environmental threats. Kenya should recognize that these changes will likely impede its ability to realize the human rights of many people.
Tuko hapa na watu, kuna waziri ya kukabiliana na janga ya ukame. Hatujaona wakifika hata kutuulizia shida iko wapi, hata wakuje tu hata watuokolee. Sasa tunaona kama tunaumia, ni kama tuko ndani ya serikali, ni kama hatuko kwa serikali. Maisha imekuwa ngumu.
As a regional leader, Kenya should assess this impact, identify which individuals and community are most vulnerable, and take steps to reduce this vulnerability and ensure that human rights standards are integrated into adaptation plans. Throughout this process, the government should ensure meaningful participation and access to relevant information for affected groups and refrain from investments and implementing actions that could undermine people's rights.
Ukame umetorotesha watu wengi, watu hawana amani. Kuna vifo vimeripotiwa katika sehemu mbalimbali katika nchi yetu ya Kenya.
Agadias Ikoha, Maisha Prime News.
All right, and Kenyans continue